Alright guys, what are we talking about today? The Manix 2 in 4V. It's the St. Nick's. Got around to testing this finally. So we're going to talk about it. The great thing is I have already tested the Para 3. And right there above the G in golden, this was tested by Kurt a long time ago, and I already know this is 65 for a hardness. So between what that one did, how hard it is, and what this one does, I have a pretty good idea of how this is done. So like always, we'll go ahead and get that cutting out of the way real quick, and then we'll come back and talk about how this one did compared to the Para 3 and what I saw some of these test at for a hardness. So let's get to it. Alright, now that we saw that cutting, go ahead and get to how it did. Just like always, sharpened, and this is where it's getting a little funny with the Manix 2s. I noticed about maybe mid to the end of 2019, and I've got almost 30 of these things now. I have taken these apart and measured the primary grinds on these, and they're off from one side to the other. Not a lot, but it is 1.1 degrees steeper on one side than the other. Moves the plunge further to one side. So this ends up being close to 34 inclusive, but the angles side to side are not the same. Meaning if I put let's say I just clamped it in the KME like normal, went 15 degrees per side, the bevel on this side here would be way wider than it is on this side right here. So kind of a pain to sharpen the newer ones on a fixed system. Only do that for testing. Otherwise, from the smooth crew wear run or so, I've noticed the M390, the 4V, quite a few of them that are nothing like my earlier ones that I've also taken apart and measured, and they're about as square as you could possibly get from side to side. So, sharpen this as close as I could to normal testing, but like I said, it's just under 34 inclusive. Same as always, sharpened it 3 times. Used it on the first couple edges before I tested it. And then I got to testing. So how did it do? The first test, which was the third edge, 198 feet fine edge, 127 feet working edge, for a total of 325 feet. So sharpened it again, stropped it again the same way, and on the verification test, 202 feet fine edge, 130 feet working edge, for a total of 332 feet. So, how does that compare to the Para 3? The Para 3, when I tested it, it's right about 35 feet better on fine edge and working edge. This was around 240, 241 fine edge and 368 to 370 total cutting. So, oddly enough, even though I know this one is 65, and I saw quite a few of these tests in the 64.2, 64.3 range, that the working edge on these is almost identical, even though the hardness is obviously different. So definitely 65. I'd have to say this is low 64, like the rest of the ones that I've seen tested, just by how it did. And for those of you who are newer to the channel, don't do much hardness testing anymore, I'll equate it the same way that I did previously. I'm into cars and drag racing, and you can put any car on the dyno and get a number. All that does is give you an idea of the potential. Your ET at the drag strip does not lie. That's just like cutting cardboard. It's where the rubber meets the road, so to say. You know that if this tested at 65, but I'm only getting 205 total feet cut with it, obviously there's something wrong here. So that's what leads me to believe this is somewhere in the low 64 range. No idea, maybe at some point I'll send it off and get a hardness on it. But what I am going to do is, since it's much easier, I should say, to freehand the newer Manix 2s, I am going to go ahead and run a test with a few of them, use some different stones, use a diamond plate, the Veneves, and maybe even something like the King or some other silicon carbide stone, and maybe even ceramic, and compare how the different finishes affect the cutting performance of the same knives. So I think that'll be interesting. It's going to take a little bit of time though. For each knife I do, I'm going to have to run 2 tests for each different way I sharpen it. So 2 knives, going to end up being 16 total tests. You can see how that's going to take some time. That will be coming. And I am going to work on the Sharks from Alex Steingraber. And I have a bunch of test blades coming up from Brian at Transparent Knives. Those are up next. So that's some of the stuff coming. That's all I have for this one. Any questions, comments, or otherwise, what you like, dislike about 4V, maybe there's something you don't know about it you might want to know, go ahead and drop that down below. As always, I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.